And our special guest today is Emily Skopov, the Democratic candidate for the State House in the 28th Legislative District. That's the district that House Speaker Mike Turzai recently resigned from and creates now an open race in the November election. Emily, thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate that.
Oh, John, thank you so much for having me. It's a really nice opportunity to talk to you today.
So let me ask you, who is Emily Skopov and why do you want to be in the State House?
Well, Emily Skopov is the person who's been campaigning here for, it'll be 4 years at the end of November. I want to be here in the State House because there are a host of issues that I believe we have to address, but I think the most basic way to put it is I want to be the kind of representative that I feel I never had, and that so many of my friends, my neighbors, the people throughout this district have never had the opportunity to have serving them. I want somebody who actually speaks for everyone in the district, who does not adhere to strict party lines or party agendas. As I like to say in a shorthand, my party is the people of the 28th district, and I feel if you do not believe in your heart, you can adequately and sincerely speak for most of the people with whom you live and work every day, you shouldn't be running for this. And I believe that I listen really well to the people here. I've worked side by side with them. I've volunteered with them. My kids are friends with their kids in the schools. And I truly think that I have a real understanding of what people want, but most of all, they want to be heard, and they want their needs and concerns to not only be addressed, but also respected. And that's really what I'm running for, to truly represent in the most basic meaning of that word, and to be a public servant rather than someone with a political agenda.
Tell us a little something about your family and your business, your occupation, your profession.
Oh, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm married. My husband's name is Todd. He's an attorney. We have 2 children. Our daughter, Austin, was just a freshman at Ohio State, although it was almost like Ohio State in Wexford, since she had to finish her first semester, unfortunately, here at home. We have a son, Wyatt, who will be a junior at North Allegheny Senior High School next year, which also might be here in my home. I don't know. And originally, I'm from New York. I was very fortunate. I went to Columbia University. Then I moved to Los Angeles for a number of years, where I got to live out my dream of working in the film industry, writing and directing television, and a small film that I did, but which really was a dream come true, because I've always been a big believer in art and stories to really bring people together. That's what attracted me to it. But once we had our kids, my husband and I both felt we wanted to bring them up in the kind of places where we grew up, where it was really about families and smaller communities who really work together. Great public schools. We love the green space here in the Pittsburgh region. Really, there's everything about Pittsburgh really fit our ideals of what we wanted to raise our children with. And we've been very happy to do that ever since. And once I got here, I started a nonprofit called No Crayon Left Behind. People like to make fun of me and say that I'm the crayon queen. But if you've ever talked to a school district or an art teacher who doesn't have crayons for their students, which is also the first thing kids use to learn to write their name with, or color a map, or draw leaves, or any of those things, you'll understand it's actually a critical supply for schools. And we've now supplied almost 2 million worldwide. We keep them out of landfills. They do not biodegrade. We recycle them. And I've also pivoted during COVID to no computer left behind. We now take donated devices that folks aren't using anymore, and we get them to people who have been really stranded on a desperate side of the digital divide. And it's really done a lot of good for a lot of people. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm just, no matter what it is, it's all about really being part of the community and trying to give back to the benefits that I've been fortunate enough to have by living here.
Well, you gave Mike Turzai a run for his money 2 years ago. Are you disappointed that he resigned and that you won't be running against him this fall?
No, I understand the question, and we joke about that sometimes, truthfully, but I think him leaving office was frankly the best move for the Pennsylvania legislature and the people of Pennsylvania, because of the obstructionism. You know, this is not, to me, with Mike Turzai, was rarely about Republican versus Democrat. My main concern, besides locally here in the district, was an absolute lack of access to a representative. I knocked almost 40,000 doors when I was campaigning last time. And the number of stories I heard from people who couldn't get a call back, an email back from the offices, people need to be able to engage with their representatives, and whether you agree or disagree with the representative, you need to be able to be heard and responded to, especially as we, the taxpayers, pay their salaries. However, Mike Turzai also was incredibly obstructionist in the legislature, and my belief was it was an abuse of his power as speaker, and it really impeded the democratic process. I want to see the process work where people with different perspectives actually have their debates, have their votes on issues, and move forward. And that was simply impossible with him in power. So by him leaving, I hope that Speaker Cutler does a better job, because truly I think it has freed up the opportunity for legislators to do their work of both parties now that he's gone.
So what do you make of your opponent in this election, Republican Rob Mercuri, who is, like you, has not held public office? What do you make of him?
Well, initially, he was somewhat of an unknown entity. Folks that I spoke to here throughout the district hadn't heard his name. They didn't really know who he was. I did, once Mike Turzai named him as his successor, and he immediately pledged to follow in Mike Turzai's footsteps legislatively. When I saw him aligning himself with President Trump, when I saw him retweeting things that were supportive of Betsy DeVos or President Trump, and some of the things that I consider to be pretty extreme, that gave me a little bit more of an idea of what I could expect. I believe sometimes it's delivered in a moderate tone, but I've seen a real adherence to what I see as extremist agendas. And most people in this district, regardless of party, are really quite moderate. I think sometimes it's hard to distinguish the Democrats from the Republicans when it comes down to the issues that most families care about. I don't think people here really support the ideas of the extremes. I think it's really what's tearing this country apart in a lot of ways. And I find it problematic, but certainly when I saw this mailer, it told me all I needed to know about what he's willing to do to win and who he's willing to align himself with. And I don't think those are the values that people in this district are very supportive of. And I think it's offensive to them and insulting to their intelligence, quite frankly, and the seriousness with which their candidates should be campaigning.
Can you describe this mailer that went out in your district the other day? I know you've had strong words about it. Describe what the mailer did, what it did wrong in your view, and your thoughts on it. Yeah,
sure. So the mailer essentially it doesn't even misquote me. The mailer says that, I think Emily Skopov the quote is something about putting Pennsylvanians back to work is bad for Pennsylvania or Pennsylvanians. And it attributes the quote to me. So when I first saw this mailer, I didn't remember saying anything like that. It was from the Penn Capital Star. I did submit an op-ed to the Penn Capital Star. So I went back and thought, what did they take out of context that I said? So I went back and read it. I don't say anything like that. However, there was a title that said, this Turzai bill, is bad for putting Pennsylvanians back to work. I don't remember the exact title. I don't have it in front of me, but although I did receive the mailer. The whole thrust of that article and the whole thrust of my op-ed piece was, in fact, I truly want to put Pennsylvanians back to work. In fact, we were one of the only states in the country that when the shutdowns began, were not allowing outdoor construction to continue. I was very supportive, in fact, of the construction industry continuing to work. What I really took issue with is that instead of taking this seriously, when in fact even the most mundane activities now are legitimately perhaps life-threatening, the Republican leadership, and particularly Mr. Turzai, put out, I believe it was something less than 70 words of a paragraph that said, essentially, let's put people back to work, try and stay safe. When you compare that with the policies that were being put forth by other legislators in other states, they had incredibly in-depth, lengthy proposals that actually gave an outline and a guidance for, here's what you should do, here's the PPE they should have, here's how you can set up protocols. It was an incredibly great roadmap that gave serious thought and attention. Mike Turzai played a political stunt and said, let's put people back to work because we, the Republicans, care about the economy. And knowing full well, Governor Wolf, no governor in their right mind could have passed that piece of legislation. It was a stunt to make it look like Republicans have a monopoly on caring about the economy. In fact, what I felt is we could have put out a piece of legislation that was really smart and thoughtful that managed to both help the economy and protect people's health in the process. And I don't think our workers deserve anything less than that. And I found it incredibly offensive and contemptuous of our workforce.
But what did the mailer do to
So,
your work that offended you?
So, well, first of all, it misquoted me as, again, saying that I believe putting Pennsylvanians back to work. My dogs are in my office right now. I apologize. My family was supposed to be dog sitting them, so they couldn't be in here. But so if you hear, you know, that's how it goes.
That's quite all right. Many of us have animals and we don't
Well,
want.
they were locked out, but I have 300 pounds of dog, and they pushed the door open. So there we go.
So start from the beginning then. So what particularly offended you about this mailer?
What offended me about the mailer is that it certainly not only misquoted, it was not a quote of mine, and it's about an issue I care about very, very deeply and seriously, which is to say, I really believe we should be putting people back to work, and we should do so safely. It is not an or. We can put people back to work, we must do it right. This mailer says that I don't want to put people back to work. It says, you know, Emily Skopov is bad, wants more taxes and fewer jobs. I always find it laughable when people say that people want to raise their taxes. I'm a taxpayer. Why do I want to raise my own taxes and fewer jobs? I believe we can create more jobs, and I'd like to see that. And it champions Rob Mercuri as sort of the savior of small businesses and families, where in fact, Rob Mercuri it wasn't even a year ago that he purchased a franchise of a UPS that, to my knowledge, he does not even manage. I've been running a small business, my nonprofit, as well as I had another small business when I was, several years ago in California. And my father, to this day, is 80 years old, grew up and still works in and runs a small business. My whole life and upbringing was due to a small business and being a successful small business owner. So it was a disingenuous piece of mail. It was flat out, it was as I called, a straight up lie. That was not a quote from me. And the whole point of my article was that I am very eager to put people back to work. And I don't think we can take that seriously enough. But I also want to see that our legislators are creative enough to think of ways to do that safely. We can't just put people back to work. We have to put them back to work with their absolute safety and protection in mind. And this mailer made it seem as though I'm simply unwilling to put people back to work, and I am ignorant or dismissive of the struggles of people trying to pay their bills.
If I understand correctly, Emily, this mailer did not come from Rob Mercuri's campaign. It came from something called the Commonwealth Leaders Fund. Does that make a difference to you?
Yeah, it absolutely makes a difference, because Rob Mercuri is definitely in a relationship with them in the sense that he knows they support him. He has not spoken out against them. He has thanked them for their support and their endorsement. There's the Leaders Fund and the foundation, and they are very much working together. It's very clear that whether they're technically supposed to be or not working together, which they shouldn't be, they are. They're housed in the same building. Their mailing addresses are in the same building. One CEO moved to the other. They are hand in glove. They're absolutely together. And the things that Rob Mercuri is not saying directly himself is being said by them on his behalf, using his image. And if he took issue with it, he would certainly speak out. He has yet to say anything. He has yet to apologize for the mischaracterization and the absolute falsehoods. And more importantly, what they stand for. This is Koch brothers money. This is Betsy DeVos money funding this organization. This is an organization that aids and abets white supremacy, that is absolutely anti-racism, that is anti-LGBTQ. They're anti-union workers. I'm very for union workers and workers' rights, anti-prevailing wage, and they're also for they're very anti-public education. So Rob Mercuri, by standing with these people and allowing them to speak for him, has now said that he is willing to support all of these things, which I frankly feel do not actually represent the people of this district. And I think they're really abhorrent policies. They're un-American, they're undemocratic, and I think they're unethical.
Finally, Emily Skopov, are you surprised that this election has heated up in July? Most people think campaigns don't begin until after Labor Day. Has this surprised you?
It's kind of like when people call a celebrity an overnight success when they've worked for like 10 years. As I said, at the end of November, I'll have been running for this seat for 4 years. So I'm not totally surprised, because it's just taken this long, whether it would have been July or not. I mean, we're working 7 days a week. We have 300 volunteers in the district. In the turnout for primary election day, I had more votes than all 3 Republicans combined. I don't think this is, the timing is interesting, but it's really not because it's this timing. It's because we have been working our butts off for 3.5 years. The committees here are incredibly hardworking. My volunteers are incredibly hardworking. To say people are really dedicating a lot of their lives right now, even during COVID, to reaching people, it would be, that's not an overstatement. So I guess the timing is just, it is, I don't want to say it is what it is. It's a cumulative effort. And I think it's just that, unfortunately, the Rob Mercuri and the people who support him really made a very, very bad mistake in assuming that we would just be quiet and allow them to continue spreading lies. But the people in this district deserve better. If people don't vote for me because they're informed, that's all we ask, is take the opportunity to get to know the character and the value of the person, the people that you can elect in November. Who are your choices? I believe, and I will always speak the truth, even if I don't think it's popular. I welcome people disagreeing with me. I think debate is critical. And I think Rob Mercuri and the Commonwealth really just made a case for where their values are and where their values aren't. And the people of this district at least deserve honesty at the very minimum. Not somebody's going to insult their intelligence with a really sad, desperate, and poorly made mailer, such as the one that went out across this district.
Well, Emily Skopov, the Democratic candidate for State House in the 28th Legislative District, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you.
Thank you, John. It was really nice to see you in some way. I appreciate it.
Thank you again. Hi, I'm John Delano, political editor at KDK Television. And our special guest today is Rob Mercuri, the Republican candidate for State House in the 28th Legislative District. That's up in the North Hills. Rob, can you help us understand what exactly is in the 28th District?
Sure, John. Hey, thanks for having me today. First, it's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm really excited to be the Republican nominee for the 28th District. Pine is a beautiful community, part of our 28th District. Also, all of the North Allegheny townships as well. So Franklin Park, McCandless, Marshall, Bradford Woods. It's a beautiful community, and we've got 2 lovely school districts.
This is the district that was represented for a number of years by House Speaker Mike Turzai, who resigned just recently. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Speaker Turzai served for 20 years and represented every person and family in the district extremely well, and has a wonderful legacy that I hope to uphold.
Well, you sort of answered the question I was going to ask you at some point, and that is, how do you think Mike Turzai did as Speaker of the House and as a representative from your area?
Yeah, Mike Turzai did us all proud in Western Pennsylvania. Not only did he demonstrate an incredible level of leadership and fiscal restraint, but he also took care of Pennsylvania families. He made sure that we had family-sustaining jobs and industry that was alive and well. He made sure that our school districts were equipped with everything that they needed to do the work with students and teachers that every working family in the district cares greatly about. He expanded our economic opportunities, and Route 19 looks the way it does today because of his hard work. So there's a legacy of leadership and compassion. And again, it's a legacy that I seek to honor as I run my campaign now to fill those big shoes.
Well, I think a lot of folks may be asking, who is Rob Mercuri? So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to, John. And I appreciate everybody who's listening who is interested in this race. State politics and state government matters, and really leadership in those roles matters now more than ever. And my life has been about learning how to be a better leader. And I'm still in that process. I'm learning every day how to be a better leader. I was born and raised in Western PA, a loving family who taught me right from wrong and instilled values. And then I went to West Point, where I learned leadership every day. It's the world's best leadership academy. And I was able to come away from West Point and serve our country, our great country, overseas in Iraq for 2 tours. And I came home with a deeper appreciation for everything that we have here. I joined the private sector for about 10 years as well after the military. and was able to benefit from our economy and our growing financial sector post-crisis. So I helped banks in New York kind of come back from the financial crisis, and then coming back to Pittsburgh, joined PNC Bank and had a lovely career with them. And this opportunity to serve again in the public sector, representing the people of our district, was something that I couldn't pass up. So when Speaker Turzai announced his retirement, I jumped at the opportunity, and after a spirited primary campaign, now we're looking at the general election in November and all that holds for both candidates. And my opponent is a lovely woman and somebody that I have respect for, but we have different viewpoints and different values of how we should interact with government and kind of conduct our lives in the Western Pennsylvania districts. And so, those are the things that I have begun to contrast as voters are looking at our records.
Are you a family man?
A family man, yes. 3 kids in public school at Pine Richland. My wife of 16 years works at our local church, Northway Christian Community. And we own a small business as well, a UPS store in Pine Township.
I think some people will say it sounds like you have a pretty good professional life between PNC Bank and UPS and your family. Why in the world do you want to be a state representative?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it really is a calling and it is a sacrifice, John, but it's something that I believe very strongly in, that we need credible and we need qualified and we need passionate people serving in the public sector and representing those working families in the Capitol building, making decisions that impact our lives. And, it's really about our families. It's about my wife and my kids and the community that they'll grow up in, and making sure that we are able to secure a wonderful upbringing for them, and that the freedoms that we hold dear are not trampled by people who don't value our American heritage like we do. And so it's really about their future and the future of our community that I'm running.
The sign that you have next to you says "Proud Conservative." I take it that's an important part of your political beliefs. You are a conservative candidate in this district.
That's right, John. I'm a conservative, and I am proud of it. I believe in the value of life, and I believe that we should honor life across all its phases. And so that means I'm a pro-life candidate. That also means that I want to bring a sense of compassion to the Capitol. And it also means that I want to raise the bar in terms of the public discourse and how we treat each other in the public sphere, and on Twitter and on Facebook. I think we need to kind of increase the level of constructive dialogue and also respectful dialogue in those forums. And so that's what I'm proud to represent as a conservative.
As you know, your opponent, Emily Skopov, the Democrat, is very much opposed to President Trump and to a lot of the things he does and says and the way he acts. Are you a Trump supporter?
I am a Trump supporter. I am a fan of his policies, and I do think that, as I mentioned before, that we can all bring a better sense of constructive dialogue and respectful behavior to the public sector, and it is one of the things that motivates me to run. And Mr. Trump is who he is, and I support him, and he's the leader of our party. But I get to be who I am too as I run for this race, and I think that's something that I want to make sure that every voter knows, is that my West Point background, my military background, the leadership that I learned, my profession as a risk manager at PNC Bank, a family man who goes to church on Sundays and who teaches Sunday school with his kids. I'll bring all of that, background and set of credentials to the job with me. And so, the fun part about democracy is that we get to vote for who best represents us. And we also get to run for office. And so I have the privilege of doing just that. My family, as I mentioned, raised me in Western Pennsylvania, and those roots run deep. My ancestors were steel workers and oil field workers in Western Pennsylvania. My dad was a social worker. My mom was a librarian. We're very kind of salt of the earth people. It was a beautiful middle class upbringing here in Western PA. And I think that's something that we should make sure that we secure for our next generation, is making sure that we can raise our families in our communities and do it safely, but that also that we have the freedom to exercise our economic activity, and that we can reopen schools and get the economy started again here as we're working through this health crisis.
Well, as you know, the race in the 28th district seems to have gotten a little hot and heavy lately. And in fact, I think some people might be surprised to know mailers have already gone out. I mean, it's July, for heaven's sakes. Most people think campaigns don't begin until after Labor Day. Are you surprised that things are starting up as soon as they are, or is that just the nature of the beast?
Yeah, not at all surprised that the race is active, and we've been active, John. As I mentioned, I've had an active primary, and there were two other candidates who are great local people, ran a spirited campaign as well, and so we've been active developing mail pieces, building a website, kind of getting the word out, making a lot of phone calls and visiting doors respectfully as well. So we've been very active for several months, and we'll continue to be active here through the summer. And then as the fall hits, especially in the presidential election year, it's going to get even busier. And so I think there's a moment now where we can have conversations about some of the local races. And then as we move into the fall, a lot of the dialogue is going to be about some of those national races. So right now, I think it's an opportunity for us to meet folks and to get our word out.
Well, there have been 3 mailers, if I understand correctly, sent out by supporters of yours. 2 of them were positive pieces about you. But the third piece, your opponent essentially would label a hatchet job and a lie and a distortion of hers. What's your view of this third mailer that was sent out that basically alleged that she wanted to shut down Pennsylvania jobs?
Yeah. Well, John, I would say too that I think it's important in forums like this, and you're doing a good job of shining some light on this race, and we appreciate that we both get to talk to voters and share our points of view on different issues. And in politics, as most people know, sometimes groups will choose a side and they'll put their resources towards one or the other candidate, and candidates often don't get to direct the exact verbiage that goes on those mail pieces or ads. And so that was the case in this mailer that you're suggesting.
So you disavow it?
Well, here's what I would say is, because I appreciate Commonwealth partners' support and their views do align with mine. I think what voters should care about, though, is what's the view on the issue of reopening the economy of both candidates. And then they can kind of hear from both of us and get to make their decision. So I would say my view is that we should restart the economy and reopen the economy safely. And to do that, we need clear guidance from our state government. And I think in many cases, that's what's been lacking, is clear and consistent guidance. The mail piece talked about a House bill that was endorsed by Speaker Turzai a few months ago that would have reopened the economy with clear guidance about which sectors may and may not reopen at that time. And that was something that was advocated against by my opponent. And so the mailer brought to light the difference there between my view and her view. So, she'll have a chance to defend her view. My view is that we should, as soon as we can, get clear and consistent guidance out to everybody in the state about the conditions for reopening and what industries can and shouldn't open and when, and that's how we should lead, with transparency and openness. But I do think that our livelihoods depend on our ability to restart our economy. And so we have to really put a lot of energy into getting our economy moving again for small businesses, but also just for employees and families who have, sustaining jobs that they want to get back to. So
I want to come back to the mailer because I do appreciate what you're saying about the issue itself. And
That's right.
she does state her position on that as well.
Yeah.
But just on the mailer itself, because this mailer, even the author of that publication has been quite critical of the distortion, lifting out of context a headline that Emily Skopov had nothing to do with. It was written by the headline writer at the paper, but using it as if it was her words in a mailer that's out there on your behalf. Are you suggesting that that was okay to do, or does that bother you?
Well, I think it bothers me that there would be a distortion. And so I would call for both sides, myself included, to make sure that we're committing to being as accurate as possible and as truthful as possible in the way that we contrast our positions and our backgrounds. And, I did reach out to Emily, my opponent, early on in the race after winning the primary, and just say, hey, this is something that's important to me. I want to make sure that we're running an honorable race. And so that's something that I will continue to commit to. So where there are falsehoods or where there are misconstrued facts, I would like to see those rectified. Now, again, as I mentioned to you, that, as candidates, we don't always get to control the narrative. Sometimes these groups create their own mail pieces and send those out. And so we'll have that happen throughout the race and probably on both sides. But again, as we get to talk to you, John, and other journalists who cover the race, we'll have an opportunity to share those perspectives directly with the voters.
And finally, Rob Mercuri, who is the Republican candidate in the 28th district. What's going to make or break this district in terms of this election? What do you think is going to help you win on November 3rd?
Well, John, I appreciate the question. And I think that, my background and experiences and credentials as a local Western Pennsylvanian, a military man, a family man, and a small business owner, that those credentials will earn me the right and the votes of those in our district. Now, I do think that turnout and making sure that we get everybody out to the polls, or that folks vote by mail before November 3rd, that's going to be critical. And so I would encourage all of your listeners to become educated on the candidates and our views. They can go to robmercury.com and learn about me, and that they would make their decision based on the facts that the candidates portray. And I think that if that happens, that we'll be in great shape.
Well, Rob Mercuri, thank you so much, sir, for taking time to be with me. I know we'll have more time throughout the campaign. I appreciate you spending a moment with me today. Thank you.
John, thanks for having me.
Just because the weekend starts doesn't mean our commitment to excellence stops. Wake up to KDKA TV News Saturday and Sunday